deep dive into the ever-evolving world of entity management.
It's certainly been a fascinating journey so far.
It really has.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? In part one, we really got into the nitty-gritty of the challenges companies face when managing legal entities across multiple countries. The sheer volume of regulations, the paperwork, the constant need to stay updated, it's a lot to handle.
And it's only becoming more complex, especially as businesses expand globally and regulations evolve.
Exactly. And then in part two, we explored how those old-school entity management tools just aren't cutting it anymore. They're clunky, they're inefficient, and they don't offer the flexibility and scalability that modern businesses need.
We saw a real hunger for more modern, intuitive solutions that can streamline processes, improve accuracy, and ultimately free up legal teams to focus on more strategic work.
And that brings us to today's episode, where we're going to dive headfirst into the future of entity management. What are the cutting-edge innovations and strategies that are shaping the landscape? And more importantly, how can you, the listener, leverage these advancements to gain a competitive edge and navigate the increasingly complex world of compliance?
The future is looking bright, but it's also full of challenges. One of the biggest game changers we're seeing is the rise of artificial intelligence.
AI, huh? I know we hear that term thrown around a lot these days, but I have to admit I'm still a bit fuzzy on how it actually applies to something as seemingly mundane as entity management.
Well, think of it this way. AI is like having an incredibly efficient and tireless assistant who can process information, analyze data, and automate tasks at a speed and scale that humans simply can't match.
Okay, that's starting to paint a picture for me. But can you give me some concrete examples of how AI is being used in this space? I'm all about real-world applications.
Absolutely. One area where we're seeing huge impact is in document management. Imagine having to sift through mountains of legal documents, contracts, filings. It's a compliance nightmare.
Oh, tell me about it. I've been there, and it's not pretty.
But with AI, you can automate the process of tagging, organizing, and even extracting key information from these documents. This not only saves a tremendous amount of time, but it also reduces the risk of errors and inconsistencies, which are crucial for compliance.
So instead of spending hours manually reviewing documents, you can have AI do the heavy lifting and free up your team to focus on higher-level tasks. Sounds like a win-win to me.
Precisely. And this is just one example. AI is also being used to automate entity creation, monitor regulatory changes in real time, and even predict potential compliance risks before they arise.
Wow, predictive compliance. That sounds almost like science fiction.
It might sound futuristic, but it's becoming a reality thanks to the power of AI. And for businesses operating in highly regulated industries, this kind of proactive approach to compliance can be a game changer.
Speaking of highly regulated industries, I know that's an area where compliance can be particularly challenging. Can you shed some light on why that is?
Absolutely. In sectors like healthcare and finance, the stakes are incredibly high. You're dealing with sensitive data, complex regulations, and constant scrutiny from regulators.
And those regulations seem to be changing all the time, don't they? It's hard enough to keep up with one set of rules, let alone multiple jurisdictions.
You hit the nail on the head. The pace of regulatory change is accelerating, and businesses in these sectors are feeling the pressure. A recent study found that nearly half of companies in regulated industries are struggling to stay current with compliance requirements.
Wow, almost half. That's a sobering statistic. So what are some of the biggest pain points for these companies? What are they finding most challenging?
One major challenge is simply keeping up with the sheer volume and complexity of regulations. It's like trying to drink from a fire hose of information, and it can be overwhelming.
I can imagine. And then there's the added pressure of ensuring data privacy and security, right? Especially with regulations like GDPR and IPA.
Absolutely. In these industries, data breaches can have catastrophic consequences, both financially and reputationally. So ensuring compliance with data privacy regulations is paramount.
So for businesses operating in these high-stakes sectors, compliance is more than just a checkbox exercise. It's an absolute necessity.
Couldn't agree more. And as we move further into the digital age, the importance of robust compliance practices will only continue to grow.
Okay, we've talked about the challenges, but now let's shift gears and talk about solutions. What are some of the key strategies that companies can adopt to achieve compliance success in this rapidly changing landscape? I'm sure our listeners are eager to hear some actionable advice.
Well, one thing that's becoming increasingly clear is that clinging to outdated tools and manual processes just isn't sustainable.
Yeah, we touched on that in part two. It's like trying to run a marathon in flip-flops. You might make it to the finish line, but it's not going to be pretty.
Exactly. So the first step is to embrace technology that can streamline operations, improve accuracy, and free up legal teams to focus on more strategic initiatives. And that's where AI comes into play in a big way.
All right, so AI is a key part of the solution. What are some other strategies that companies should be considering?
Well, another critical piece of the puzzle is establishing a single source of truth for all entity data.
Okay, I've heard that term before, but can you break it down for me? What exactly does that mean in practice?
Imagine having all your critical entity information, corporate filings, legal documents, compliance records in one centralized, easily accessible repository.
So instead of having information scattered across different systems and spreadsheets, it's all in one place.
Yeah.
That sounds like a much more efficient way to manage things.
Exactly. And not only is it more efficient, but it also helps to ensure data accuracy and consistency, which is essential for compliance.
Makes sense. So we've got AI and a centralized data repository. Any other key ingredients for compliance success?
Another strategy that's gaining traction is the use of workflow automation.
Okay, tell me more about that. I'm all about finding ways to make things easier and more efficient.
Think about all those repetitive manual tasks that are involved in entity management. Things like creating new entities, filing compliance documents, generating reports. These tasks can eat up a lot of time and resources.
And let's be honest, they're not exactly the most exciting or intellectually stimulating tasks, are they?
Not really. But with workflow automation, you can delegate these tasks to software, freeing up your team to focus on more strategic work.
So it's about working smarter, not harder. I like it.
Yeah.
But I have to wonder, with all this talk of AI and automation, what does the future hold for the human element of compliance?
That's an excellent question, and it's one that we'll delve into further in our next episode. But I can tell you, the role of the compliance professional is evolving, not disappearing. It's becoming more strategic, more advisory, and more focused on leveraging technology to achieve better outcomes.
Okay, I'm intrigued. I can't wait to explore that topic in more depth. But for now, I think we've covered a lot of ground in this episode. We've explored the challenges of entity management, the limitations of old-school tools, and the exciting possibilities offered by AI and other technological advancements.
It's clear that the landscape is changing rapidly, and those who embrace these changes will be the ones who thrive.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, the key takeaway is this. Don't be afraid to challenge the status quo, explore new solutions, and embrace the power of technology to transform your approach to entity management.
Well said. Stay tuned for our next episode where we'll delve deeper into the strategic adoption of technology and explore how the role of the compliance professional is evolving in this exciting new era.
I can't wait. Until then, thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.
It's been a pleasure. Picking up where we left off, let's delve a little deeper into the specific strategies companies can use to thrive in this evolving world of entity management.
I'm all ears. Let's get tactical.
One powerful approach is to think about compliance proactively rather than reactively. It's about anticipating challenges and putting systems in place to address them before they become major headaches.
Okay, I like that mindset.
Yeah.
But how do you actually put that into practice? It sounds great in theory, but what are some tangible steps businesses can take?
A great starting point is establishing a single source of truth for all your entity data. We touched on this briefly in the last episode, but it's worth emphasizing.
I agree. It's one of those concepts that sounds simple on the surface, but can have a huge impact when implemented effectively.
Exactly. Imagine having all your crucial information in corporation documents, licenses, compliance filings, all neatly organized and easily accessible in a centralized system.
So no more scrambling through filing cabinets or trying to decipher cryptic spreadsheets. Sign me up.
That's the idea. It not only saves time and reduces frustration, but also minimizes the risk of errors or inconsistencies that could lead to compliance issues.
So it's about creating a more streamlined and efficient system overall.
Precisely. And once you have that solid foundation, you can start leveraging technology to automate many of the routine tasks that bog down legal teams.
Ah, yes, the magic of automation.
Yeah.
Tell me more about how that plays into this proactive compliance strategy.
Think about things like entity formations, annual filings, even regulatory change monitoring. These are tasks that can be incredibly time-consuming when done manually, but can be significantly streamlined with the right technology.
So instead of having a team of paralegals spending countless hours on these repetitive tasks, you can have software handle it automatically.
Exactly. And that frees up those valuable human resources to focus on more strategic and complex issues that require human expertise and judgment.
Okay, I'm seeing the benefits here. It's not just about efficiency, it's about optimizing how you use your resources and allowing your legal team to operate at their highest potential.
You got it. And let's not forget that automation also reduces the risk of human error, which is a major factor in compliance failures.
That's a crucial point. Accuracy and consistency are paramount when it comes to compliance.
Absolutely. And here's where things get really interesting. We can take this automation a step further by incorporating AI into the equation.
Okay, we've danced around the topic of AI a bit, but I'm ready to dive deeper. How can AI specifically enhance compliance efforts?
Think of AI as a superpowered compliance assistant. It can analyze vast amounts of data, identify patterns, and flag potential issues before they even become problems.
So it's like having a 24/7 compliance watchdog constantly scanning the horizon for potential threats.
In a way, yes, AI can monitor regulatory changes, track deadlines, and even analyze your company's activities to identify potential compliance gaps.
Wow, that's pretty impressive. It sounds like AI could be a game changer for companies trying to stay ahead of the compliance curve.
It certainly has the potential, and the best part is that AI is constantly learning and improving. As it processes more data, it becomes even better at identifying risks and recommending solutions.
So it's not a static solution, it's something that evolves and adapts over time.
Exactly, and that's critical in today's dynamic regulatory landscape.
Okay, we've talked a lot about the tech side of things, but I'm curious about the human element. How do you see the role of the compliance professional changing in this increasingly automated world?
That's a great question and one that deserves careful consideration. While AI and automation are transforming many aspects of compliance, the human element remains essential.
So it's not about replacing humans with robots.
Not at all. It's about empowering compliance professionals with the tools and insights they need to operate more effectively and strategically.
So how do you envision that shift happening in practice?
I see compliance professionals becoming more like strategic advisors, using their expertise and judgment to guide their organizations through complex regulatory landscapes.
So less about manually checking boxes and more about providing strategic guidance and insights.
Precisely. They'll be leveraging technology to automate routine tasks, freeing up their time to focus on higher-level activities like risk assessment, policy development, and training.
It sounds like a much more fulfilling and impactful role.
I believe so, and ultimately it's about creating a more robust and resilient compliance culture within organizations.
This is all fascinating stuff, but I have to admit I'm still wrapping my head around how all these pieces fit together. We've got proactive compliance, single source of truth automation AI, and the evolving role of the compliance professional. How does it all come together to create a truly effective compliance strategy?
That's a great question, and it leads us perfectly into the final part of our deep dive.
All right, bring on part 3. I'm ready to see how this puzzle comes together. All right, we're back and ready to wrap up our deep dive into the future of entity management. After those first 2 parts, I'm really starting to see how much potential there is for real transformation in this field.
I agree. It's an exciting time to be involved in entity management. There's a real sense of innovation and progress in the air.
Totally. But I think it's also important to acknowledge that all this change can feel a bit overwhelming, especially if you're trying to keep up with everything from AI to automation to, shifting regulatory landscape.
Absolutely. It's a lot to digest. But that's exactly why we wanted to dedicate this final part to bringing it all together, to provide a roadmap, so to speak, for how all these different pieces can fit together to create a truly effective compliance ecosystem.
Okay, so in the last episode, we left off on this cliffhanger about how all these different elements, the proactive compliance, the single source of truth, the automation, the AI, all come together to form a successful compliance strategy. Can you walk us through that?
Sure. I think the biggest shift that needs to happen is in how we view compliance itself. Instead of seeing it as a reactive, box-checking exercise, we need to embrace a more proactive and holistic approach.
So less about just trying to avoid getting penalized and more about building a culture of compliance that's embedded in everything the organization does.
Exactly. And that's where all these different elements we've been discussing come into play. Remember that centralized data repository we talked about? That becomes your foundation, the single source of truth that informs all your decisions. Then you layer on automation to streamline those repetitive tasks and minimize the risk of errors. And finally, AI comes in to provide that extra layer of intelligence, constantly scanning for potential risks and offering solutions before they even become problems.
So it's really about using technology strategically to create a more efficient, more accurate, and ultimately more effective compliance program.
Right. But it's crucial to remember that technology is just a tool. It's not a magic bullet. It's about how you implement it, how you integrate it into your existing workflows, and how you empower your people to use it effectively.
So the human element is still essential, even in this increasingly automated world.
Absolutely. Compliance professionals aren't going anywhere, but their roles are evolving. They're becoming more like strategic advisors, guiding their organizations through these complex regulatory landscapes. Less about manually checking boxes and more about using data to make informed decisions, develop proactive compliance strategies, and really ensure that compliance is baked into every facet of the organization.
It sounds like a much more challenging, but ultimately much more rewarding role.
I agree. And I think it's a role that's only going to become more important as compliance continues to be a top priority for businesses of all sizes.
Well, this has been an incredibly insightful deep dive. We've covered so much ground, from the challenges of traditional entity management to the incredible potential of AI and automation. I'm sure our listeners have a lot to think about as they navigate their own compliance journeys.
I hope so. My main takeaway would be don't be afraid to challenge the status quo. Embrace change, explore new solutions, and never underestimate the power of collaboration.
Well said. And with that, we come to the end of another deep dive. Thank you to our expert for sharing your insights and expertise with us today.
It's been my pleasure.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us. Keep asking those tough questions, keep pushing boundaries, and keep striving to build a more compliant and ethical business world. Until next time.